I want to get to one of your other recent columns about how Trump won the culture by more than he won the election.
Mm-hmm.
Your reasons were Trump and his allies fight to control attention the way Democrats don't. There's a corporate desire to shift right. There's a male backlash, and Biden left a huge cultural and political vacuum for Trump to fill. I think this is a correct observation. I'm curious to hear why you think that is, because he won by 200,000 votes, and I kind of wonder if they've Jedi mind tricked us into believing that it was a bigger cultural victory than it was actually as well, so similarly to the electoral victory. But I'm wondering what you think about that.
Yeah, there's a bunch here. So yeah, they not only won by very few votes. I mean, 200,000 in the battleground states, it was larger than that. But he won 49.8% of the popular vote, I believe. Sure. He had a smaller popular vote victory in 2024 than Hillary Clinton did in 2016. And the reaction to Hillary Clinton's vote margin in 2016 was not, oh, Clinton is the future of Democratic of American politics, and the culture is going to move in her direction. So he wins. You have this huge just swing, and it's Mark Zuckerberg is coming out there with his chain and announcing the end of censorship, and we're moving back to
our buddy Chris Hayes is also doing the chain. What's happening? This is all elder millennials.
You got some pearls.
Are you thinking about a chain too?
I'm just going to go with a single earring. I think
a single earring.
Okay,
yeah.
But it'll be one of the
bunch of 42-year-old influencers just trying to deal with our imminent death.
Exactly. Well, I mean, that's a different podcast, I guess. That's more the kind of thing I do.
Okay.
Where was I?
Mark Zuckerberg's
Sorry, I'm on
chain.
Imminent death now.
Mark Zuckerberg's chain.
So it was a very, very narrow political victory. And then I think there was a lot of pent-up pressure on some things that unleashed itself. So I think that people who control a lot of attention have become very angry at their employee bases, Musk and Zuckerberg and, all these sort of tech billionaires who have very, very loud voices. I mean, they are modern, super important celebrities. And so they wanted to move right. They didn't like all the DEI stuff they'd built into their own companies. They didn't like some of the moderation stuff they'd built into their own companies. So they took it as an excuse, as an opportunity to reassert a sort of cultural and de facto control over their own companies. That made things feel like they were swinging faster. I do think part of this is Biden, that Biden was sort of an interregnum, a sort of pause, not in policy, but in terms of the culture of American politics. It's you think about Barack Obama and the dominance he had. Politics was about how you felt about Barack Obama. And then you had Donald Trump, Barack Obama's literal opposite. Politics was about how you felt about Donald Trump. Then you had Joe Biden, and politics was about how you felt about Donald Trump. Right. The Biden people, whether because of the limitations of his communication as given his age, or also because of a strategy that they felt Trump mobilized their anti-MAGA coalition, there was a sort of agreement to let Trump remain at the center of American politics. And when he did that for long enough, he really became it. And so things shifted in his direction. I do think there's a big gender war dynamic. I think we've moved from the future is female to Mark Zuckerberg's, companies don't have enough masculine energy anymore, right? Yeah. And that's happening at a big cultural level. And I just don't think, I said in that column that I thought at that moment I was writing that column, we were at or near the peak of Trump vibes, because he hadn't started governing yet. And as soon as you do, then actually you begin to create your backlash. Then you begin to create your counterforces. And I already think it culturally doesn't feel the same way. I mean, the resistance, the opposition to him, it felt so absent. It felt so quiet. Democrats felt so fractured. They had so little voice. And already I think this is beginning to shift. And so, part of it was just also, it was easy for it to all be vibes for a while. But now it's things actually happening and people actually watching things happen and deciding if they're upset about the things that are happening. And so already I think we're getting into more of the mess again.
Yeah. We could do a whole podcast on this question. So I'll just, we can do a short version of it and then come back around. But as I think about what are things that Democrats could glom onto that would help them take back the culture, right? Because it does, they seem to be lost in the wilderness on that front as much as on the political front, right? What is, I forget who I was talking to, somebody recently, they're like, if you're in high school, what is an issue that is Democrat aligned that you could grab onto that would feel cool or feel trendy or whatever? It's hard to think about. When we were growing up, gay stuff, gay marriage, anti-Iraq war, right? There were plenty of examples of that. And I don't know, part of me thinks maybe the easy answer to this is going after the phones And
Yeah, I
like the
actually
tech
do.
the billionaires and the phones, like it's all together in something, and they're breaking our brains, and they got to fight them. But I'm interested in your thing on that theory or other ideas you might have on that front.
Yeah, I'll say two things. So this is an argument I've been making for a bit. I did a you mentioned Chris and his chain. So I think he debuted that on my show on this episode we did about attention.
Yeah, and you guys have the interesting camera work that you do, where it's like cinematic.
Oh yeah, people should come watch it. It's great. It's
cinematic upshooting.
But it's something he and I talk about in that one thing I really believe is that the next dominant politician, sort of Joe Biden, was too old to be part of social media in an authentic way. And so I actually think in some ways it helped him in the 2020 primary because he hadn't absorbed some of the currents in progressive online media that got a lot of his competitors to take stances that were politically toxic. But the person who's going to come next, I think, and then Trump and Musk have completely embraced everything that makes social media terrible and is breaking our brains, and they've broken their own brains, and they're making their broken brains like the model of a brain, right, at the moment in American politics and culture. I think the next person is going to actually be of this such that they can hate it and channel the rage people have at it in the way that, and I do think people forget this about Barack Obama, one thing that was very effective about him in 2004 and 2008 was he channeled a rage at how politics and culture had changed, like the political consultants, the red and blue, dicing us up, the cable news, 24-hour news cycle. He used to make fun of Politico. People didn't like how things felt, and he was very good at channeling. He was of it, but he, like them, didn't like it. Yeah. Like my joke is that the next person to win will have read a lot of Jonathan Haidt. You see this happening in a bunch of states. Republican and Democratic governors alike are banning cell phones in schools. Trump, in like embracing all this stuff so tightly, TikTok and this and that, there's some good politics in it, but he's not able to sort of be in the thing that most of us sense, which is whatever you want your actual strategy with it to be. Maybe it's not closing down TikTok. Maybe it's banning phones in schools. It's things like that. The sense that something has gone terribly wrong at that level of culture is very real. The other thing, though, that I would say is that I think there's something to the way communication works now that you see incredibly potent cultural moments rise and fall very, very fast. Yeah. So, we're like, oh, Democrats have no handle on the culture. Well, they completely dominated it. Like 4 or 5 years ago, you saw Black Lives Matter, you saw Me Too, right? Wokeness, before wokeness was an epithet, you had Jack Dorsey on stages wearing a Stay Woke, shirt. Like it was like not initially seen as a bad thing. Yeah. Things move. I think it has something to do with the way social media selects for engagement. So they select for first the engaging new idea, and then all of the anger the engaging new idea creates over time, then, subsequently gets selected for. So you have Me Too, and then you have like Pete Hegseth, right? You have like the all the way backlash, Donald Trump, this set of people. There's going to be, I think, a sort of almost hydraulic system like that. I think our culture is very unstable because of the way we communicate and drive it. So I'm not sure like what is going to drive it is so much a policy topic people glom onto. What worked for Trump is that he represents a kind of masculinity that became degraded, that he was one of the last people who was very significant in public life still holding to, and you could feel that all click together around the shot with his fist in the air after the assassination attempt. And I don't know what'll be the next thing, but I don't think it'll just be they came up with a good policy. I mean, it might be anti-Trumpism. That's going to be possibly a very, very powerful politics, depending on how things go. I do think Democrats need to learn how to exist in the culture that we have. One of the things I think is always very telling is when Democrats keep saying they have a media problem, that they still think of it all as a media, that if only the gatekeepers were better or they could get booked on the right shows, they have to go out and compete. Joe Rogan was not 3 or 4 years ago a closed space to them. Yes. They drove him away.
I was at a conference of Democratic types, so they're strategizing. They're like, we need more liberal media outlets and we got to fund them and create them. I'm like, sure, you can do that, but that's not it. You got to engage with the non-political cultural outlets.
And that means you need people who are attractive to those outlets, which have a lot of different, I'm not saying it's only Joe Rogan, it's Brene Brown, it's all these different things out there that matter. But you need people who are authentically of the era, of the moment. And we don't know who that person is. Yeah. That'll be a person, not a party. Parties don't change culture, people do.